is on a journey. It's The Journey. And here's your host, David Hackett.
Growing up in the 70s and 80s, our guest knew he was odd because of the activities kids liked were not always the same that you wanted to do. He was bullied and teased constantly, which I can relate to, and he never understood why. But I'm not going to talk about everything I've got written in front of me because it's his journey, his way, his life. So we welcome our guest, Christopher, to the journey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here, David.
No pleasure. Now, we spoke before started recording. Everyone has a journey, and you heard the joke I always say to guests to break the ice. The journey begins when we was born, which is funny in its own right mind, because everyone says, yeah, that's the earliest memory, and I'm thinking, how do you remember being born? Because you don't, but it is the earliest memory. But where does your earliest memory of where your journey began?
Actually, I wasn't born. I was beamed down from somewhere.
Was it Mars? Was it Venus? Was it the outer
They didn't
cosmos?
leave a note. They didn't leave a note. My mom just said, "Oh, you just came and there you are."
And the saying goes, I'm an alien. I came from another country.
You don't look like an alien, David.
I know,
But anyway.
but that's what they class me as.
Well, it's a nice disguise. I like it.
Thanks. I read it well, don't I? Now, the clue in the title of how we're going to talk about today's subject is how we both acting, because we're both autistic and we're not afraid to admit it now. Back in the day, I admit I was afraid to admit I'm autistic, but autism is not, defined as autism now. It's not even diagnosed as Asperger's. It's known as ASD. So we got to say, oh, I'm ASD. I'm on the ASD. You don't label yourself, and even the principle of ASD makes it seem like it's still a label.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were talking about the 70s and 80s. Yes, I was born in 1969. And so I grew up in an era where we had no idea what that was. I mean, nobody knew. They just thought you were strange and different. And my mom, God bless the woman, really tried her best to do what she had. My younger brother does not have it. He's just straight and regular. I, though, was very different. And my mother, being in education, couldn't quite figure out what was up with her son. And because I wouldn't make eye contact, I'd say things that were very inappropriate that my mother would tell me, Christopher, that's not the right thing to say. Don't say that. I'm like, what did I say? And so, and so my mom would whenever I couldn't make eye contact, she would grab my head. She said, okay, just don't move. Look at me. And so I've learned to make eye contact better than I used to. And now I'm 53, and it's a little bit of a struggle still, a little bit, but not a lot. So I've been able to adapt. But like I said, in the 70s and 80s, though, nobody knew what this was. Nobody knew what was going on. And the kids, when I was growing up, my fellow classmates, some of them thought I was pretty cool because I was really different, and they kind of liked that. Some of them thought I was really dorky, and they tried to pick on me. I was teased a lot, bullied. They weren't very kind. And so not knowing what is going on really drove me nuts. But when I graduated high school in 88 and I moved into college, I met a wonderful lady, my wife. Her name is Jamie, and the quirkiness is what attracted her to me. She really loved that quirkiness, and so I was like, wow. And because I really had a hard time even picking up ladies or women or anything, because I think I scared them or anything else. I don't know. I I don't have a clue. I always kept wondering to myself, why can't I ever have a girlfriend?
I can
So
relate to that. I can relate to that.
yeah, it's a little bit like that from that movie About Time. All I want is a girlfriend,
Mm.
and I was like, "Yep, I understand." So we got married that same year in '89, and yes, so that means I've been married for 33 years. It's a long time. So she still obviously puts up with me, and and she's my biggest, honestly, she's my biggest advocate. She today is still, she knows everything. But the thing is, David, is that I didn't know for sure about my diagnosis until I was 35. I
Mm.
had no idea. And the only reason why I knew I had it was like we were talking in the pre show. We have four kids, uh, my oldest daughter, my son, and then we had twin daughters. And the twin daughters were the ones that got diagnosed with autism. Now, my one of my twins was a low functioning, and the other twin was a high functioning. And so we were first told that Sarah, the low functioning one, she'd have to live with us forever because she couldn't be able to take care of herself. And but our hospital here at in Kansas City, Children's Mercy, was conducting an experiment with a medication called Namenda. Namenda was a medication that was given to Alzheimer's patients, but they saw a unique thing being done with younger kids. And so they gave my daughter Namenda. And so what started happening was as she started to grow, her brain actually started to form uh, in more of a synaptic and started actually coming together. And she went from being a low functioning to a high functioning because of the intervention of that medication to change as she was growing. So again, it's not a cure. There's no cure. There is no cure. I'm just going to say that right now. But this, at least, what we were able to get her moved from the low functioning to the high functioning through this medication called Namenda. But again, I want to state for the record, please be very careful. Talk to your doctor first. Do
Mm.
not just go out and get anything.
Yeah.
You need to can talk to them. You need to just have this discussion before you do anything.
Yeah. And we must add, we are, and I will say this for the benefit for my side, we are not trained qualified physicians. We just give an opinion. We give an opinion that is our own, not of what we read in medical journals or research. This is just purely our thoughts.
Right. This is just what happened. So what I'm telling you is just what happened to me. And in my journey, this is what happened. And so we got to thinking and doing a little more research. We're thinking, they found by the point that they were born that this is genetic. And so that's when we decided to get myself tested. And sure enough, I was in fact autistic. And it didn't surprise my wife. And it honestly didn't surprise me. But when you go through your 70s and 80s and very early 90s and you have no clue what is going on, you're like, what am I doing wrong? What's the problem? And nobody can tell you. And until that time, I didn't have an idea. And so when I finally got diagnosed for the first time ever, I was like, oh my gosh, an answer. I know. I finally got it. I figured it out. I now know what's going on. And that can be really, really frustrating if you never knew for so long until that point.
It's like you talk about in the 80s and 70s not knowing. I grew up obviously in the 90s, early 90s, and obviously I started school when you graduated. So trying to not make you old there, but but the fact was that, I grew up for the first 11 years. I had someone with me in school because they thought I had behavioral problems. And so they had to have someone literally attached to me in the old school day. They couldn't leave my side because they thought I was going to be a disruptive influence. And I had that going into senior school for the last first 4 years. And then in my last year, they said, okay, David's pretty much in his last year. He can do things independently. He's not as bad as he was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And then I went to college and they said, have you been tested for this? And I'm like, no. So they referred me to a behavioral specialist. And that behavioral specialist then said, at the age of 18, I was by then, they said, you've got autism. I was like, really? Huh. And they then said, you got Asperger's. And obviously back then, that was when Asperger's and autism was still labeled as Asperger's and autism. But, and it felt like, you put a label on me now, I've got to live with that. And per se, it has influenced the way I have been in jobs because people look at you differently. They don't want to treat you as an individual who's got special needs per se. They like to, this is in England, so I'm saying from England point of view.
Okay.
They don't like to treat you as an independent. They just try to put that label on you and then say, there you go, you're this, you're like that. And then you go and say, I got this. When you go to an interview, we don't want to take you because we don't want the responsibility.
And that is difficult, David. I completely understand that. And I get questions from lots of people about what do you do for a job? And the best thing I tell them is if you don't want to tell them, that's your liberty in America. Now, of course, we're talking America. In America, you don't have to divulge that information in an interview. Now then, when you go for the job and then you go to HR, once you've been hired, if you've been hired and you go to HR, you can then divulge that information to HR. And HR then you can create what they call accommodations. And what these accommodations do is that if there are certain things that you need for help, like communication wise, that would be a bit more of a benefit for the people that you're working with, then they will do that. Now HR doesn't have to even say you have Asperger's. They just say, well, look, Chris needs to have his stuff written down. Or if you're going to give him instructions, you got to give him the whole thing because he'll do exactly what you tell him to do. And so you can save it and wait until you get to that point, and then you can have those things on file. So that way you're covered. And so that way your job then can turn around and, okay, fine. Well, this person needs this. And so you don't have to divulge that information. But that is something you don't have to do.
But another thing we say in pre-interview, I always like to be identified as David. Now, the argument is, when I met someone a few years ago, he was like, how do you want me to treat you? And I said, what way? And he said, do you want me to treat you as David with autism or David as David? I said, treat me as David. Mm-hmm. So that, in the context with that person, he treats me as David. So if anything goes wrong, he treats me like any other person. But if I said I was David with autism, he wouldn't be so, I'm not saying he is a harsh person because he isn't, but he would treat me more sympathetically and understand because of my autism. Now, when I did volunteering in England and I did what I did in England, mm-hmm. I was very shy and they knew I had autism, but at the same time, they still treated me as David. But so I was the both sides of the coin. So I still got, and I will cuss here, so I'll make sure I put the E on it. They bollocked me for something that was not my, so if I did something wrong, they give me grief.
Yeah.
But they also understood they couldn't go over the limit because of my autism.
Right. And I understand. I completely understand. And I always try to tell people that we're not a label. You know, we could go look at everybody and put a label on them. I mean, and for us in in the autism community, we want to just be known by our name. We don't need this label hanging over us. We don't want to be, oh, you have OCD, so you're OCD Chris, or you're manic depressant, you're manic depressant Chris, or not even being autistic, say you're bipolar. Well, I'm bipolar Chris. You know, nobody wants that. And you're just who you are. And yes, you have this, but it should never define you as a person.
No.
Yes, there are different things. I mean, you know, some are amazing athletes. Well, do you want to be known as the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback, or do you want to be known as Patrick Mahomes? I mean, you know, what would you rather be known as? Well, of course, Patrick's going to say, well, Patrick Mahomes. Why would I be? I mean, yes, I'm a quarterback and I'm an athlete, but I'm not going to be that forever. And yes, we will live with this for the rest of our lives, but having the label, though, is difficult. And actually, I can move a little bit into the book a little bit too, David, because the title of the book is called Weirdo 2.0. And when I got out of college, I became a teacher. I still am a teacher. I started in 1995 teaching as a general ed teacher. And then the last 6 years, I've been teaching, of all things, special education, believe it or not. And so the book basically was about my last year in another district before I made the move, about the issues that I had because of my condition. And so the title and the name came from my superintendent, who went to the head of HR. And I wish I was kidding. I really wish I was kidding, people, but this is true. He actually told the head of HR to get rid of the weirdo. And I was floored. And how I know that's because my union, I was part of my union. My rep had spoken with the head of HR, and that's what she told her. And she was absolutely astounded, just completely shocked. But so hence the title, Weirdo, because it came from him. And I wanted to own it, because I didn't want him to like identify me as, well, you're just a weirdo. No, I'm gonna own it, and it's gonna be mine. And I'm gonna take this, and I'm gonna tell everybody exactly what you all did, and what is you just better take it and enjoy it, because the thing is, the book deals mostly with work harassment, and being let go or fired, or because the managers couldn't work with you. You're different, so we don't understand you, so we're not going to work with you.
I get that. And it's just because they don't want to accept that, they outcast you. You become the outcast. You become that withdrawn in the corner, cowering away, because you're afraid of saying something, because you get picked on for it. Even though if you're right, they will say no, and they'll prove anything to say no, because you're wrong, and you're right. And anyone who knows you're right. But it's just that one individual who will say no, and it will take that one person to knock you.
Well, and David, that's what the book is. It's taking a stand. I, for the longest time, did what you did. Basically said, okay, well, I'll quit, because they weren't going to renew my contract. I was like, well, I'll just resign. So I had resigned from different positions in my past until this point, and enough was enough. I was like, that's it. I'm taking a stand. I'm not taking it anymore. I'm tired of this. And so I took a stand. And so the book, in a way, is me taking a stand. And my hope is that anyone out there that's watching, listening, that this was my stand. And in my hopes is to inspire anybody out there to do the same thing if you're in that same situation. Uh, it's difficult for us because when they say, well, I don't know how often they told you this, David, but when I tell them I'm autistic, they look at me and they say, well, you don't look autistic. And I'm like, uh, what am I supposed to look like then?
Green
Because
horns, pink tail,
I know, do I have it branded on me? What am I supposed to do? And because it's like, if you're, I mean, they're expecting to see, like, me in a wheelchair, or they're expecting to see me, with, something distorted or different about your face or anything else, but it's not. You just look like everybody else walking around like any other human being, but it's like, it's not on the outside, it's the inside. and
Yeah.
and that's what really got to me a little bit.
It's the inner disability that, and I'll say this for myself, it's the inner disability that you can't express, because even trying to express it, that's where the difficulty lays, because it's about trying to explain it to people who don't understand. Like, I'm autistic, but, and then you have to find the right words for the right person, because if you say it right to one person, to the other person it may sound wrong, immoral, offensive, so you have to adapt to each case. So if you tell me I'm autistic, you tell me your definition to me, I understand it. If you tell someone outside on the street, they were like, what?
Yeah,
So it's like,
exactly.
when I was at one of my, I will use the example, but I won't say the location, but when I was at a previous location,
Mm-hmm.
at a previous job, they were like, how are you, David? I said, fine. And they said, okay. And they got to know me. And they said, so tell me about you. Now I explained, and I trusted these people, even though they did me wrong. Well, they didn't do me wrong. It's management that did me wrong. But
Uh-huh.
they understood me for me. And they knew I had my issues. They knew David was autistic. They knew to treat me fairly. Now, where I was working before was a high pressure job, but it was still a job.
Yes.
People who was not management saw me as David with autism, but they still treated me as David. Now, when it came to management, they saw David as David, and they didn't care about David with autism, and they just, and this is sadly the case why they did it, they got rid of me and they never listened to my case. Every time, they gave me this is, they spoke to me. I said no, because I know I didn't do the situation. I'm not going to say why I did, because I don't want to implicate, and I've been told not to majorly talk about it, but I'm talking about it for a
Right.
person. But they said, did you do it? I said no. They said, okay. Next day they came to me again and they took me to the actual manager above the manager. And they said,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked me again, and I said no, and they said, well, we've got evidence that you have. I said, okay, and they said, okay, go back to work. Third day they asked me again. I said no. Fifth day came along, did my about, I think I was 4 hours into the shift, and they said, David, you got to come with us. And I said, okay. And they spoke to me quietly and said, what, just get the things that you need. You've been suspended. And
Mm.
I felt like I was being a prisoner, because he said, I have to walk you to the door. I said, not to the front door, because where the front door was where other people were. And I'm like, no, they said, we walk you to the door. They don't know. We just look like we're talking. I'm like, still looks morally wrong, because you escorted me out. And I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to lash out because I'm autistic. But
Mm.
they treated me wrong, and they said, we'll keep you updated. So I kept ringing for the next 5 weeks. I wanted to find out things, and they kept ignoring my calls.
Ah.
And the only reason I know that is because I rang up from another number. They answered straight away. But as soon as they
Yes.
heard it was me, they cut it off. I went to the EEOC. They couldn't take it on, so I couldn't complain about being treated unfairly. I couldn't get unemployment because they said I wasn't suitable, because one of the rules are, I don't know why, but they said I was fired within just cause, even though I know it didn't do anything wrong.
Was that written? Was
Yeah,
that something
yeah.
documented?
That's what the, place of employment sent to unemployment. They said he was fired within just cause.
Okay, but so you didn't receive a written statement of why you were let go?
Yeah, and like I said, I'm trying to avoid not talking about the main subject on this interview, because that's one thing they did tell me I'm not allowed to publicly say. So,
Oh,
but
that was an agreement?
they said you were, you've been suspended because
Yes.
you did this. We will, update you accordingly once the investigation's closed.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, 5 weeks later, they wrote me a letter saying you were in breach of your contract, so we have to fire you. But in that 5 weeks not working, hindsight, unemployment could have kept me going. And I was, they gave me the baseline assessment saying, yeah, you can have unemployment. But as soon as they contacted my employer and suspended me,
Mm-hmm.
they said I was dismissed within just cause. Like I said,
Well, David, and
like I said, I'm not going to talk about it on the
no,
interview
that's
because
okay. And David, that's okay. That's okay. Because like I said, in this whole beautiful thing here, I had they couldn't fire me. Basically, they couldn't, I was a tenured teacher. They couldn't fire me. They didn't have a legitimate, solid thing to fire me. So that was the biggest issue for them. And so they were going to bring me back to another school to try to fire me properly. And so I was like, no, this is not going to work. And so what we did was, I had actually I contacted the White House. I honestly did contact the White House, and Lady David, I can email you the letter later, because the EEOC sent me a letter back telling me, hey, look, listen, the president, which was Barack Obama at the time, wants to know what is going on. And so he was saying I was tasked to find out what is going on with you. And the letter was CC'd to the White House. I kid you not. I honestly kid you not. This actually happened. And so I told them, I said, well, right now, I'm working with the human rights people in Kansas City. And so we sat down and we basically negotiated a breakup. And so it was written down and contract and all that. And so I have that in the book. And then everybody's wondering, well, wait a minute, you wrote the book. That means you're in breach of your contract. Well, not so fast. So in our agreement, the stipulations were this: that they would tell any employer that would ask that, yes, I did work there for between 2000 to 2014. And they said that they did not, I was not able to be hired again. I was just not hired again. And the last thing was that there would be no negative comments, anything about myself when they asked. And so that's how we left it. No negative comments. And that was the rub right there. And so I applied with lots of different uh, schools all across the United States. I mean, several schools across the United States. I had a couple of interviews, but then no job. Nobody would hire me. And I couldn't understand what was going on until I received a job. I was hired on as a contractor for the United States government for immigration.
Hmm.
Yes, David, I worked for immigration. Who knows? I might have even seen your file.
Probably.
So anyway, so anyway, uh, when you become hired on as a contractor or as a government employee, you eventually are interviewed by the another branch called the uh, um oh shoot the no, I forgot the name of it again. Basically, they're like an HR. The office. Oh, I got it. The Office of Personal Management.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Office of Personal Management comes in, and what they do is they research you. They go into the FBI files, they go into IRS files, they go into CIA files, they go into your neighbors, they talk to your neighbors, they do a solid background on you. And so when you go in there, you better tell the truth straight out, because if you tell them anything that's not true, they will know you're lying. So when they came to the question about my old job with the district that I had taught with, I told them exactly what happened. And then the gal said, okay, well, that explains this. And so she pulls out this manila envelope and she pulls out this sheet of paper and she says, well, this is what the district told us. Said that you worked from 2014, said that you're not able to be hired again. And then they said one other thing that threw me completely off. They said, in essence, they said basically I was unemployable. So every single school that ever tried to call would tell them that all this and that I was unemployable. I was not a person to be hired. So in essence, they broke the contract.
Mm.
They broke the agreement. And because they broke the agreement, I now have this. And the reason, and probably some people ask, why didn't you sue them? I tried. I'll be honest with you. Many lawyers that I spoke to several lawyers, they won't touch these kind of cases, David. They won't, because they're not defined, they're not too concrete. They can be very subjective, and so they usually shy away from any of those cases. Like if you had sued David for what happened with you, you might have a hard time winning your case. And so that's why it's very difficult for us to go turn around and then go after these people, because it's a very
it's a
not easy to go on.
It is a very borderline. It's like when I was suspended, they said, don't talk about it on social media, because obviously I used Facebook a lot back then and I don't use it as much now, but they said, don't talk about it. They made sure I didn't talk about it. So if anyone questioned me, where are you? Because I did have work colleagues, where are you? Where are you? And I'm like, I had to lie for that duration of me not being there. They said, if anyone asks, you're ill or you're on vacation. And I felt bad because some of them I did trust. But the ones that did find out, they were like, what happened? And I, in the end, I did tell them, and they like, we knew something kind of happened. And I was like, yeah, but I was told not to, because they didn't want to be portrayed in the bad light.
Exactly.
Now, logistically, the situation could have been bad, where they could have got further enforcements involved because of the situation it was. I'm trying to stay, or not saying it, so I'm trying to keep it neutral. But
no, I understand, David.
But they, they said, you're suspended, you're, not allowed to talk about it. And like, okay. And I wanted to tell people because I couldn't access specialized counseling. I wanted to talk to my former work colleagues who I trusted.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't. And
It's frustrating.
I felt frustrated. So now
Mhm.
when I talk about it, and I have talked about it with them since, I do keep in contact with them, and then like they got my back because they say, well, you didn't do that, David. I say, thank you. I know I didn't do that, but they think I did. And they said, and they do say they arseholes, they pigs, they don't think of anything else but themselves. And I'm like, yeah, but at the time they wanted me to be like this because they don't want me to tell you. And they feel bad because I couldn't tell them. And I'm like, it's not your fault. It's not my
Mhm.
fault. It's the part of the thing that they said. So I had to respect that.
Right. And so, David, I want to say to your audience out there, definitely if you run into this, and I know there have been lots of people, like I said, that I know have run into this, know what your legal rights are. Know whatever was written, whatever was agreed upon, whatever, keep it, keep everything. Even emails, anything. If you have an inkling that you think something's going to happen, something might happen. Honestly, a lot of my material, you always, sometimes you get a sixth sense of, there is something really wrong here. And so I would email other emails showing, trying to pick up proof that yes, they are stepping outside of my ADA accommodation bounds. And and so they are basically breaking the law. Um, and you've got to see, I think for myself in my journey, I'll be honest with you, David, because I'm now 53, it was a little easier for me to be able to fight back. When I was in my 30s, 20s, and 30s, it was, you didn't know. It was hard because everybody was much older than you and you didn't know. But now it's a different ball game. It's like, okay, guess what? I'm now at your age. I know, and I know exactly how to deal with you all. And so it gets really, really, you just get you frustrated. And it's like, well, guess what? Now I know. And so actually, David, now to tell you, I'm about ready to walk into becoming an administrator myself. How about that? And so I'm serious. You and so I even borrowed, I don't know if you know who Temple Grandin is,
I've heard of
but
them.
um, so I asked their publishing company if I could borrow some of her resource material from her books. And they gave me, of course, I had to show them exactly what I was going to use. And then they gave me full permission. I was like, thank you. God bless you so much for letting me do that. And so some of her material is in here because she was able to find other people that went through the same ordeals that you and I have been through. And so this discrimination that we are facing, and it's really it's kind of a hidden discrimination. I mean, really, I mean, like it'd be easy if we were, say, a different. I'm sorry, but if we were black, if we were Hispanic, even if we were a female, it would be easier for us to be able to prove these kind of things because it's blatantly obvious right in front of their face. Well, you fired me because I'm black. Well, you fired me because I'm Hispanic. And that has happened. And I wish it would never happen. But sadly, there are people out there that are quite bigotous and they would go out and do it anyway.
Mm.
But when it comes to us, everything's inside and they can't see that. And so that's what makes it so difficult. And that's why, again, I did this because I wanted everyone, not just in the autism community, but everyone out there, that this is the situation that a lot of us are running into right now,
Yeah.
even now. And it hurts. It hurts. And I've been hurt a lot. And if it wasn't for my wife, who I love so much, I really do, and she understands. See, that's the thing. For us, we tend to not be very social, which is I understand. But when you have that one person, just that one person that gets you and understands you, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, totally
I,
agree.
and I really hope for your wife, David. I hope that's the case for you as well, because uh, we try. We're the men. You know, we're guys. We've got some. You know, we've got something. We've got to. You know, we're the head of the household. We've got to be able to, you know, do our job, as so society says. And when you keep getting knocked down because society's, you know, pushing you away, it makes it really difficult to do
Yeah.
anything.
And talking about when I did get fired, suspended, then fired, it was at the time where it it just fell apart because my wife fell ill and she was in hospital with and had to have I think it was 15 operations in the space of a few weeks. She was seriously ill. So
Mm.
I had, like I said, I had no money, I had to live off earned money, even though it's earned money, you know, it was not fair on her because, but she understood at the same time. But at the same time, it was a critical stage in her life because it defined how last year was. It was that, and as the Queen Elizabeth II said in 1991, I believe, it was the Annus Horribilis, which was the Latin for horrible year. It
Hmm.
was that kind of year last year. Everything just fell apart after I got fired. It's like, and being
Yeah,
autistic,
yeah.
that was one big meltdown for me per se. Even though I didn't show the meltdown, it just melted away, and I thought I'm not getting anywhere.
Oh, I'll be honest with you, David. I fell into a deep depression. When I was, you know, I was very depressed, and we also nearly lost our house. Honestly, we nearly lost it. Thankfully, we had a really good lawyer who was. We have lawyers that help people that don't have really any money, and so they do it pro bono, kind of a,
Yeah, I've
you
heard
know.
of that.
So so they so they told us to what to do to keep the house to save the home, and so we did that, and and I'm still sitting here in my house now today, but um, it was a very very dark time even for us. Um, my wife has been through some surgeries herself. Um, she has back issues. She's a tall lady. She's, you know, 5'10". Her father was a former NFL football player. So, uh, but you know, she has the same problem her dad has, and that's the spine. And so she's gone through her own kind of demons and her own medical issues that she's been dealing with. And it fell like us, it fell at a terrible time. And it was difficult. It was very difficult. And so I'll just say to anybody out there also that you should have within your city or your town a human rights department in your city government. Now, for you, David, I would have probably gone to Pittsburgh, and I know probably in Pittsburgh they had one. And I'm a little surprised that EEOC um,
I gave
didn't
them,
say
I
any.
get,
I mean,
I gave them everything that happened, and they just said there's no case for wanted. So that doesn't make sense at all.
I know that doesn't make sense to me either because, like I said, I mean, honestly, I didn't contact them. The president did, and so, uh, but so I went and I spoke with the human rights people, and if you're part of a union can help guide you on what you need to do. That's if your place of employment offers one.
Well,
Uh,
I know when I was in the original position, it was union, and I think that's one reason why they moved me away to a non-union position, even though it's still in the same location. So I think that's where they caught me because they say it's not union now. We can do. So I think that's where
aha.
So that's where I think the borderline happened. If I chose to stick where I was, I knew I was safe. And
Yes.
I did have a union rep who knew for me from obviously previous department. They said you could come back to your position, and I thought, why is he telling me this? I was, offered the slightly better pay, better hours for me, and I was thinking, why is he offering me to go back to my old position? And it makes sense now. But at the
Right.
time, I was so in my mind, it's better for me, better hours. I've got more time to be with, people.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it was just like a cloud,
No, I understand. And see, that's again, David, that's where these kind of discussions that we're having right now and these journeys that we've been taking right now are so important for others. These are things we've been through. I've been through them. Obviously, you now know David's been through them. And you've got to have that representation.
Mm.
You have to have that because nobody else is going to understand. Nobody else wants to understand. There are too many people. And like I said, I deal with special education right now myself. And I have to deal with general ed teachers that don't really want to deal with your kid because they don't really understand the kid, even though we give them something called an IEP,
Yeah.
which if you for those who don't know what an IEP is, it's an individualized education plan for that student. And so they've got accommodations, they got modifications, they have all kinds of things that say legally that this is how you have to teach this child. And so that covers them. And then I'm their case manager. And so I make sure that's being enforced. And so in the job field, we have to have that representation also. And with HR, I can't stress enough, meet with your HR people. They have to keep that information confidential. They have to, they don't have a choice because if they break it, then they're breaking the law. And that would be easy to prove in a court of law. So, go to your HR department, speak to them about how what's going on with your situation, and then I mean it's like anything else. Like when I tore my meniscus and I had to have surgery, I had to have a specialized form by my doctor to tell HR, okay, this is the things that Chris has to do to be able to do his job. And so it's the same kind of thing. Have those accommodations in writing in your file. So that way they can't just turn around and have nothing. You've got to have backing. You've got to be able to cover yourself. And so in my journey, I've learned these kind of things. And that's why now I want to share to as many people as I possibly can, because I don't think it's being talked about enough. I really think it is just a very silent discrimination that is just something that, oh, it's just one kid who's swept on the rug. Well, we had a young man, his name was Graham. I can't forget his last name, but he was the one that got escorted out of the Target store through the walk of shame. And because he felt so bad and felt so depressed, he literally went up into a hotel room. This has happened in California, and he jumped off and committed suicide. I mean, these things can really affect us personally, and to making rash decisions that we have no business making. And that's what can get very scary. And so that's why I implore everybody, like I said, know your situation and have people that can back you.
And it is true on that. So last of all, before we go into the conclusion and websites and all, where can people get hold of your book?
Okay. So the book is available as an ebook, paperback, and hardback at Amazon, through the Amazon Kindle, and through just normally buying it. Now then, what you'll have to do is you'll have to type in my name, Christopher Wheat, Wheat, and then type in Weirdo 2.0. And the reason why I titled it 2.0 is because I had an original version that I didn't have enough material. So I put more in and I said, let's throw a 2.0 in there. So I did. And I want to let you know, yes, I did self-publish this, but I want to let you know that I've had people read this book and this little award thing here. It's not just any book. I've had people that I don't know. I've had lots of people that read it and loved it. And so obviously whatever you're paying for, when you're buying this, you're getting your money's worth. You are definitely not getting it just from something. It really hits people. And so please, if you don't do Amazon, it is on Barnes and Noble, Gobo, Google, or no, I'm sorry, not Google, Apple, several of the ebook websites. So it's pretty easy to find.
Okay. And last of all, what would you say to people to help them on their journey going forward?
Okay. So in your journey, for you, David, and for everybody else out there, have a friend, have someone with you that you can be accountable to, that you can talk to. Don't ever find yourself alone. Always have somebody. And I know, again, we tend to be socially odd, but there's always someone out there. Now, again, for me and for David, we have our wives. But for those that are not married, if you have a friend, I think that's the biggest thing that can help you, because at least they can help. They'll listen, and if they're really the friend, they'll help give you really good advice and help you. Because right now we're in a place that still, we just got done with Autism Awareness Month in
April.
In April. Did anybody know? Was anybody aware? See, and there it is. And so we tend to be kind of a poke. And this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so, again, have somebody with you along your journey. Have somebody with you along that walk with you in your journey.
Christopher, thank you for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
That was The Journey, hosted by David Hackett. Be sure to like, subscribe and listen to another journey coming soon.